This is how your spine should look from the side, with 3 uniform curves. This is how your spine may look if you don't care for it properly. A build-up of harmful compressive stress degenerating your spine. G'day, how's it going? Here we see the AP image. So these markers here, the R, that is for right. So this person is facing away from us. I've just put in a horizontal line here just to show how we're observing a short right leg here. Even without the line, it's pretty obvious to tell that. You can see that the heights of the iliac crests here are way off, and we're dealing with a tilted pelvis here, and as a result of that we see a scoliosis, particularly through the thoracolumbar segment here. So that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, T12, T11. As we saw in the lateral view, is pretty squashed. It just looks really jammed in through here. These faint little teardrop sort of opacities of bone, they represent the spinous processes. So those knobbly bits of bone that you can feel on your back, that's what these are. And this is hard to appreciate here. You need to draw on some spatial awareness, but if you look at this segment, think in a 3D plane. This segment is rotated from a bird's eye view clockwise. So it's pointing out that way, out this way here. And we can observe various rotations and a whole different range of malpositions when looking at an X-ray, but basically, this is not a textbook sort of example of a spine. You know, we can see that it's crooked, and straight from the outset, we can see that there are areas of compression and uneven loading through the spine. Out of interest up the top here, if you've ever had an X-ray before and you've been asked to have your mouth open, it says that we can image the relationship of C1 to C2. So C1 we can see there, and there, this sort of like piece of bone there, that is all C2, and this is where most of the rotation of the neck comes from. This looks okay. Like, see here, these little pointy bits, that's a little bit of osteophytic change there. In other words, just bone sort of becoming more gnarly and willowy, growing outwards there. In younger individuals, you'll see this to be a more clearly defined margin. We don't really learn a huge amount from this image. The hip joints are relatively okay, the spaces are there. Really what we gain from this is the obvious short right leg and the scoliotic spine. Now, this person may have an anatomical short leg. The only real way to tell that is to rip the bones out of their body, put them in a vise and measure them. Measuring leg length inequalities off X-rays has been attempted, and there's perhaps a way of doing it somewhat accurately. But yeah, the best way would be to do it in the flesh, which is obviously not possible. It's probably partly functional, meaning because of the things that this person does, let's say the person was a soccer player, always kicking with the right leg, flexing that relative to this, extending through this hip, you'll develop a twist through the sacroiliac joints, and that could manifest as what we call an apparent or functional short leg, meaning it's not really short, it's just become short as a result of what the person does in activity. Most people have one leg shorter than the other. As I've said before, it's usually around 2 to 5 mil, so we don't worry about that, it's no big deal. Sometimes people can have a short leg that is 12 or 20 mil, and that might warrant the use of a heel lift or even a specially shaped boot, but that is less common. It's just interesting to have a look at X-rays and have a look how crooked we all are, and probably, even though this is not a textbook spine, it probably represents a very normal spine for somebody who is in their 40s, because nobody gets to 40 years of age and has a perfect spine, especially if the person is really active or really sedentary. So let's start from the bottom. You can see here is L5, and this is the lumbar spine, which should be concave from behind. You can see this patient is facing to the right. And the disc spaces are relatively well preserved. As we would expect, L5, S1 is reduced in disc height. And generally speaking, you would describe this person as being hyperlordotic, meaning a slightly increased curve. You can see this sacrum is acting a bit like a shelf, sticking the booty out, so to speak. So if you look at the skin contours, you can see how the butt kind of sticks out a bit. And this is a presentation that's quite common in African women, say, but also in very athletic people or people who might have been gymnasts or dancers from a young age. So counting up the spine here, we come to T12. T11, T12 doesn't look all that crash hot, really, does it? It looks like these vertebrae have been squashed over the years and they're starting to become elongated, especially through T10 here. You can see these little pin-like protruding bits of bone, otherwise known as osteophytes. That is the body's attempt to reintroduce stability underneath all of this compressive stress and slouching. The vertebrae are hard to see through here because the ribs and the shoulder joints obstruct the vertebra below. It's just, generally speaking, it's a hard region of the body to image. But if you have a look at the contours of the body, here's the lumbar lordosis, the thoracic kyphosis. It's quite pronounced through there and then becomes somewhat flat in the upper thoracic spine. Again, it's hard to see here. And then we come to the neck, and I guess one word to describe this neck is awful, sadly. The neck, like the lumbar spine, should demonstrate a concave curve from behind or a lordosis. I guess we see a little bit of a lordosis through here. Here's C1, the otherwise known as the atlas. Here's C2, so the top two vertebra, and the third, fourth, perhaps there's a bit of a lordosis there, but through 4, 5, 6, 7, we're seeing a reversal of the cervical curve. So we're seeing a cervical kyphosis, and typically C5 and C6 are the most commonly degenerated segments of the cervical spine. So you can pretty much x-ray anybody's spine who's above 30 and you're likely to see degeneration in this region here, as we do in this person. You can see that C5, 6 is really struggling here. It no longer looks like a box, a square box. It looks like some sort of trapezoid shape. Here are osteophytes. Here's an osteophyte. C6 is becoming sort of pointy, looking more like a boot or a high heel shoe. The disc heights, they're okay, they're not too bad, but the curve is awful. So this is a classic case of where somebody could be using, at the very least, a rolled towel in the evenings. The person should lie on the back with a rolled towel placed behind here to try and passively restore the cervical lordosis. But what's even better is a Denerol, a cervical Denerol. That is a specially cut piece of foam that, in the same way as rolling on a live towel, lying down on a rolled towel, you would lie on this with it positioned, in this person's case, probably around C6. So you'd have this specially cut piece of foam. The point would be around here, and the person's head would lie backwards over that, and the person should spend 15 to 20 minutes a day, at least for 6 days a week, for a period of 3 months, to try and passively restore this curve. Now, the same could be done with a thoracic retrainer in through here. This is another product by dinner roll. So the person would lie on it with it positioned somewhere around here, lying backwards over it, and the weight of the person's body positioned over this piece of foam on the ground would over time passively restore extension through these hyperflexed segments. And then another good practice for this person would be to use a back block. That is simply a cork or foam block that is positioned directly underneath the sacrum. Again, the person would be lying on their back, and this serves to decompress the lumbar spine. These two segments here, L4 and L5, would be quite compressed as compared to the rest of the spine. And lying on that for even just 2 to 3 minutes every evening before going to bed would help to unload, but again, over time, perhaps restore some better curvature through the lumbar spine. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yeah, thanks mate, good on you.